a pretty cool thing you can do on a 5 dominant chord. Let's say we're in the key of F. So we're on that 5 chord, that C7 chord. Now let's say the type of 7 chord we're dealing with here. We have a flat 9, sharp 9, sharp 11, 13, natural 13. So that's the type of dominant chord we're dealing with. So, so if we made it into a scale, it would be that half whole diminished scale. And maybe I'll do another video, maybe teaching that whole concept of like half whole diminished, and the chords we can derive from that. But in any case, if you're familiar with that, let's say that's the type of harmony that we're dealing with on that dominant chord. So one thing I used to do a lot, I still do a little bit, I would take basically any shape. So let's say we have this. Like this is a pretty common voicing right here for C dominant. So we have the flat 7, the flat 9, the third of the dominant chord, and the natural 13 on top. So since that half whole diminished is a symmetrical scale, in this case, we can actually move this same shape up by a certain interval, and the notes of all those subsequent chords will still fall within that scale. So if we move it up and down minor thirds, that's basically what we have happening there. So let's move this down a minor third. And that works because we have the 5th of C7, the flat 7 of C7, the flat 9, and the sharp 11. Going back to this, let's move it up a minor third now. So now we have the flat 9, the third, the 5th, and the root. So that works. And then we move this up a minor third again. This works as well because we have the third, the 5th. So we have the flat 7. And then we have the sharp 9. So that works just fine too. So we have... Let's just look at the other fingerings as well. So you can of course explore the other fingerings on other string sets. So in this case, for this one, we have same shape. So if we moved this down, we're just changing the root of that particular chord. So in this case, we would have let's say we were going through all 4 of those, and let's look at like different ways we can resolve them to that 1 major chord. So we're resolving each of these to F major. So we're somehow getting from these chords to this type of thing, F major, whether it's major 6, major 7, major 9, whatever the case may be. So with this one, what I'm gonna do, so that flat 7 of the dominant chord is just dying to move down a half step to the 3rd to resolve down. So I'm gonna move it down a half step. This note, in my opinion, that flat 9 of of the C7 chord is just dying to move down a half step, so I'm going to move that down to the 5th of the 1 chord as well. So far we have, and then this note, that sharp 11 of the C7 chord, in my opinion, that would do well to move down a half step to the root as well. So I'm going to move these down like that. Notice those are both major triads. But we're keeping that G on the D string to kind of stabilize as a common tone. So that's one way we can resolve this. We could also do something like this. That's fine as well in a jazz context. From like a resolving standpoint though, I think this adds a little more stronger resolution. So this is fine as well. What about this one? So this flat 9 of the C7 chord is just dying to move down to that 3rd, so I'm going to move it down to that. This flat 9 of the C7 chord, it's just dying to move down to that 5th of the 1 chord, so I'm going to move it down there. So far we have this this 3rd of the C7 chord. There's actually a few things we could do with this. We could keep it there. Because it's the major 7 of the 1 major 7 chord. We could move it down a whole step, so that would be fine as well. And that would be the 6th of the 1 major chord. Or we could move it up to resolve to the root of the 1 chord. That's fine as well. Now this top note, which is the 13 of that 5 dominant chord, what can we do with that? Well, we could keep it there because it is the 3rd of the 1 chord. However, we're already moving this note down to the 3rd. So if we want to avoid octaves, one thing we could do is we could just move it down a whole step to the 9 of the 1 chord. So now this would be our chord. And of course we could also do, like we covered, moving this one down a whole step. We could also do it like this, so we have, if we're keeping this note the same as a common tone, we keep the 3rd of the dominant chord, we just keep it there as the 7th of the 1 major chord. And this is actually a 3 minor 7 chord, this A minor 7, with the F in the bass. So that would be fine though. We could do that. We could do this, or we could do this. I'm gonna do that for now. So far we have. What about this one? So this one, to me, that flat 9 of the dominant chord is just dying to move down a half step to the 5th of the 1 chord. So I'm going to do that. So we have this 3rd. In theory, we could keep it there. It would be the 7th of the 1 major chord. But I'm going to move it up a half step to the root. So let's do that for now. So we have. Now this note, the 5th of the dominant chord, we could also keep it there. It'd be the 9th of the 1 chord. But I think I'm going to move it up a whole step to the 3rd of the 1 chord. And then this top note, which is the root of the 5 dominant chord. Now if we keep that there, we have an octave because we're already moving this note down a half step to the 5th of the 1 chord. So if we want to avoid that, it'd be perfectly fine if we just move this one up a whole step to the 6th of the 1 chord. So now we have, and that's perfectly fine. So far we have Now what about this one? So we have the 3rd, 5th, flat 7, and sharp 9 of that 5 dominant. So, what I probably want to do here, so I'm gonna, one of the big notes I'm looking at here that really wants to move down is this flat 7. Whenever I see that flat 7, I want to move it down to the 3rd of that 1 chord. So first of all, I'm gonna make sure I do that. So we're gonna move this one down a whole step. So in this case, obviously this note can't go up because we're already moving this one down. So they're not going to both land on A. So we can move this one down a whole step to the root of the 1 chord. So this 5th of the dominant chord can move down to the root of the 1 chord. So now what about this one? We could do that, but I think in this case, it would be fine to move this down in a non-stepwise motion. So we could move it down a 3rd. That's fine in like some circumstances every now and then. We could move it down a 3rd. So I'm going to do that. So we go, because if we moved it up, we would have the same issue of 2 notes, 2 of the same note. If we moved it down a step, now we have a little bit more of like a 6 minor sound, which I want to avoid. Like that 6 should really be stabilized by like the 3rd or the root or something, or even the 5th. So since we don't want to move it up, because then we have the same note, we don't want to move it down a step, because then we have something that sounds more like some kind of minor chord. I'm gonna move this down a 3rd down to the 5th of the 1 chord. So now what about that sharp 9 of the C7 chord, the 5 dominant? We could move this down a half step to the 6th. That would be fine as well. In which case we have the same chord that we resolved to before. We could also move it up a half step to the major 7 of the 1 chord. So now we have, and that would be fine as well. So far we have and yeah, that's what we have. So you can do this with any type of like cluster of notes that falls inside that that chord range, that octatonic kind of like dominant chord. You could do the sharp 11, do the sharp 9 and sharp 11. This is also a pretty common shape. And the underlying idea with this exercise, though, is you're taking one of those shapes, like for example this one, and looking at how you can resolve it to that 1 chord. Then you move the shape down a minor 3rd, look at how you can resolve it. You can do something like that. Let's say you have it down here, you resolve it like this. Or you could do something like, if you're doing it up here, that'd be the fingering. Or if you have it down here, you could do something like, but that's the underlying idea. You just find a shape that falls in the notes of that chord that we discussed, that flat dominant, flat 9, sharp 11, natural 13 chord. And just move that shape by minor 3rds and see how you can resolve it to that 1 major chord. And that's a pretty good exercise for, familiarizing yourself with how that particular change can resolve in different ways.